Sig, I'm John Kane. I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, February 18th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do buffalo speeches and we don't do prayers. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way, but our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all right here, live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So, let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. I encourage you to check it out. We stream live video of the show on Facebook Live on our group pages. We take the audio, we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out as a podcast to all of your favorite podcast platforms. We take the video, we put it up on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. You can follow us on Instagram at Let's Talk Native TV, and you can follow us on Twitter at Let's Talk Native. That's a mouthful. I am the host and producer of the show. I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who is managing our audio and our video and helping us put some graphics and some images up on the screen behind us as we go along. My guest today is Sakoietah, who is a frequent guest on the show, and he's my go-to guy in terms of staying in touch with what's happening not only in Mohawk territory or Gonyageha territory, but even a lot of the stuff going on out west, missing and murdered Indigenous women, a lot of that stuff. So I want to welcome Sakoietah to the show again. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me again. I guess I got to say, Donna Dono Sego. So, as my opening remarks, I don't know if I was going to get in the end with that long introduction you had.
You got to set the stage. All right. So, I mean, look, there's, it's kind of some dramatic stuff going on right now. And on my promo, I say, look, we got their attention now. Not only has there been this, really 10-year conflict going on in Wet'suwet'en territory, Wet'suwet'en camp and such, but the blockades that have primarily been taking place in Mohawk territories of rail, highways, even border crossings. Although the folks down here in Seneca territory, I guess, blocked the Peace Bridge for a little bit too. But the blockades have really grabbed the attention of Canada. And was it today that? Yeah, it was today that they addressed that the House of Commons, Trudeau, all the big heavyweights came out to address the House of Commons on the Wet'suwet'en conflict and the blockades. So you had actually sent me the link so I could listen in on some of that. It's pretty dramatic stuff. I mean, look, a lot of it's lip service, and I get that, but there's a lot of admission there, at least on the part of the Liberals, and just a lot of hate, hostility, and aggression that comes out from from the right. Whether it's Andrew Scheer and his opposition party or whoever. You can tell that we have definitely put Canada on notice with the amount of again, how vulnerable, again, we've shown their infrastructure to be, and how intolerant we remain over their aggression. So there was that, and of course, the other thing that took place was the press conference by a bunch of band council, Mohawk band counselors, I guess is the best way to put it. And I'm trying to be fair and kind, I guess. But I want to talk about both. So, I mean, I don't. So, guys, if you want to weigh in a little bit on what you heard out of the House of Commons first, and then we can get into what some of the fearless band counselors had to say.
Yeah, well, Trudeau started out the meeting, and basically he gave a talk which we both know is not really going to all happen that way. But he did talk about not keeping the police out of the areas, especially Kaindanega, where the OPP have gathered in big numbers around there. And he said that we need to keep them out. We need to have peaceful talks and we need to talk about a peaceful situation. So
Well,
that's a
and
big change.
he not only squarely addressed his desire to avoid any kind of well, at least that's what he said anyway, avoid any kind of paramilitary violence against those who were doing these blockades. And again, he made it very clear that in from his perspective that this was an action that people were taking in response to what's happening in Wet'suwet'en territory, and the failure of Canada to properly address a lot of the issues the tensions that still exist between Native people and Canada. And he said all that stuff. I mean, and he was very. It sounded all great. The words all sounded great, but unfortunately, we know that those words sometimes ring pretty hollow when you know that at the end of the day, this is about us saying stop trying to run a pipeline through Native territories. And even as they admit that their Supreme Court of Canada has acknowledged that territories like Wet'suwet'en, they have original title to the land, and that it's theirs. It's not for Canada to do with what they want. And there seems to be some inability to recognize that anybody other than Canada has a right to say what happens on territory. In fact, Trudeau went so far as to say, because this pipeline doesn't cross the provincial borders of British Columbia into other provinces, so I'm trying to word this properly, that it's a provincial problem. It's not even a federal problem. So it's almost like he passed the buck and said this is totally up to BC. Of course, it does cross provincial borders because it leaves what BC claims to be their territory and enters into Wet'suwet'en territory. So there's a lot of doublespeak that comes from Trudeau on this stuff. But he sounds just great, doesn't he?
Yeah, from whose end, I don't know. But, the whole issue that started with the newest raid into Wet'suwet'en and the guys, people in Tyendinaga set up a land defense on the railroad tracks and said that no trains would be coming through. And that's the reason why. And there was a meeting in Tyendinaga last weekend on Saturday, and to talk with Mark Miller, who is I can't remember what they call him.
It's like Indian Affairs Minister or something like that.
Indigenous Relations Minister?
Yeah, or something, yeah.
Something like that. But anyways, he came in with the idea of saying, well, we need to polish the covenant chain. And the covenant chain had no thing in there except for the people of Tyendinaga saying, okay, we can talk about that. And he came and he wanted to reconvene the proper ways with the covenant chain, which was actually between the Queen of England and our people, and had no basis with the colonial state of Canada. And they say they have a constitution, but in 1968, Justin's father, Pierre, brought forth this white paper, and that was going to destroy the original people anyways with that white paper, but he couldn't pass anything. He couldn't even be accepted as a country because he didn't have a language, he didn't have a culture, and he had no land, And so Justin was basically trying to do the same thing as his father did. But it seems like there's too many Native people, in his side of that so-called borderline, and everybody is reacting to it, and everybody's doing stuff. And the biggest, everybody did, demonstrations and land defender protests. They're doing it all over the country now. And the biggest one was Tyendinaga, because Tyendinaga cut off the supplies from Montreal to Toronto, and they're trying to push it as well. They're hurting the average Canadian citizen because he can't travel from one area to the other.
Well, and that's kind of where the opposition leader, the Andrew Scheer, tried to get in to say that this is just a few rogue scoundrels, like it's just a few terrorists that are trying to hold all of Canada, and of course then he tries to include Native people into that they're being held hostage by these by this violent few terrorists essentially, and then he goes on to try to say that the overwhelming majority of Native people want these pipelines through their lands. I mean, so he stands up there in the House of Commons as if he has some legal or any type of right to speak on behalf of Native people. And just watching those two sides, though, it was incredible, because every time Trudeau would speak, you could hear the Conservatives heckling him. I mean, to the point where the Speaker of the House actually had to stop Trudeau and had to call these guys out for heckling and for interfering. I mean, when you talk about an uncivilized process, I mean, these guys are like a bunch of children. I mean, it's amazing to watch how crazy. I mean, look, and it's the same thing when you watch any of this parliamentary stuff in England. I mean, these guys actually throw stuff at each other and all kinds of other stuff. It's insanity. But to listen to Trudeau make it sound like he was giving so many concessions, but the fact of the matter is, he actually positioned Canada to take over a private oil and gas pipeline so he could run it as a Canadian project through Native territory. So he's pushing this issue and pipelines every bit as much as TransCanada or anybody else is.
Yeah, and the basic thing he did was, the Canadian people believe that it's the Canadian tax dollar that paid for that project. But myself and others believe that it was the trust fund that belonged to us that paid for it.
And you got to explain that a little bit, because I think most people have no idea, especially on the U.S. side. But even on the other side of the imaginary line, there's a lot of I guess misunderstanding. This trust fund is essentially money that is not Canadian taxpayer money. It is Native money that essentially the Crown is sitting on.
Yeah, and what it is, all the resources that were developed, the money that came out of it was 100%, and the Queen decided that she was going to take 60% to be sent to England, and 40% was going to be here for the Native people. However, the Native people can't handle money, so she set up a board from her colonial state of Canada to decide what they're going to do with it. And that's what our people don't understand. They talk about band councils and the monies that come into band councils, and there's always strings attached from the Canadian government to these band councils.
And again, so they suggested that it's Canadian taxpayers that are funding these band councils.
Right. They say that same thing, but the monies that come in, and our people don't understand it from across our territories, that money belongs to our people. That's money already that has been dedicated, that it belongs to our people.
And it came from our people. It came from our lands. It came from the lands that we either allowed them or to extract money from or wealth from, or that they did it without permission. On the last show that I did, of course, you joined me a couple of shows ago when we were first talking about this. But on the last show, I talked a lot about this question or debate whether Native people have the veto power over projects being imposed on their land. And of course, according to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, they mentioned this concept of free, prior, and informed consent 6 times throughout that document. And free, prior, and informed consent is the same thing as veto power. I mean, it is essentially saying you can't do these things unless, and not just Canada, this is any of these colonial states. What the international community is saying is, unless you get free consent from the people, and that consent has to come in the form that it is freely given, that they are fully informed about what it is that you're proposing, and that you have real consent, not just consultation. So this idea of free, prior, and informed consent says, look, if you don't have that from the people, then you can't impose your will on not only on their lands, but on projects that'll affect their land. So even, you take a look at something like the Dakota Access Pipeline. They could argue, well, that pipeline wasn't actually going through Standing Rock; it was upstream of that. But the fact of the matter is that pipeline clearly posed a threat to Standing Rock. So that too would fit under these project developments that would require free, prior, and informed consent. So there's that debate, and Trudeau's talked out of both sides of his face. There's been people, even when BC claimed to take the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and passed a bill to make it part of British Columbian law, they immediately said, well, that's not to say that we're giving Native people veto power. So right. They say on one hand, oh yeah, we acknowledge the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a matter of British Columbian law, and we acknowledge that in order to do projects, we need free, prior, and informed consent. And then they turn around and say, well, but that doesn't mean that they have say. And that's where the conservatives and this Andrew Scheer, I mean, he's basically saying just send the military in, send the RCMP and knock heads and lock all these terrorists up. That's essentially what he's saying. And of course Trudeau is trying to do a tap dance around this stuff. He's double speaking on the things that he does that have violated Native people. And tries to come across as this nice guy, but you're right. He's still carrying water from his dad.
Yeah. And him sending to the meeting in Tyendinaga, which I was a part of, he came with the idea that he was going to come there and talk to people and hopefully take the blockade, if you call it a blockade. I call it a land defense method. And he thought that he was going to do that and polish the covenant chain. However, that wasn't the idea he got from our people. Our people informed him that the covenant chain doesn't belong to Canada. And if there was a process to be talking, the Queen had to put a representative, which usually was the Attorney General. The Attorney General dealt with that stuff. And then possibly one of his ministers, like Mark Miller, would be down there. And the basic thing that came out of that meeting, and I'm not going to describe the whole meeting, but the basic thing that came out of that every time was that he was told, take the RCMP out of Wet'suwet'en territory.
Well, and see, that seemed to be the problem. As I watched, this conversation, devolve into, this polishing the chain, and they made it sound like just them showing up was them offering something, and that they needed these blockades ended, as a response to just showing up doesn't do anything. I mean, them sending up Miller or anybody else, or Trudeau giving a speech or something, that's not a concession. I mean, all these words are hollow if they don't pull these, the RCMP out of Wet'suwet'en territory. Then they haven't done anything yet. So they think merely engaging us in a conversation is them offering an olive branch, and that we have to respond somehow in kind, which is putting this thing exactly backwards. I mean, I saw somebody put a great meme out. They said Canada is not being held hostage; they're being held accountable. And that's right. Exactly right. These blockades and Tyendinaga and Kahnawake, different places. I mean, again, I know the Thousand Island Bridge was actually blocked for a while. All of these actions are in solidarity and are calling for one thing: pull the RCMP out of Wet'suwet'en territory.
Right, and it's going on all over the country.
Right,
in BC and Manitoba and Saskatchewan, all over the place, that people are reacting to that, and it's not just a little group of radicals, which Scheer. Yeah. I compare Scheer to the KKK.
Absolutely.
If you want to know what the KKK is about, just listen to Andrew Scheer.
Sure.
And he'll tell you everything. And the fact is, Wet'suwet'en was invaded in a criminal act. They should have been criminalized for what they did, because that's part of their society or group that they hang with. That was a criminal action that happened.
Well, and even listening to the women out there in Wet'suwet'en territory, Wet'suwet'en camp, and everything else, they said every time the the pipeline companies or anybody else does something that interferes with their life, it takes days or hours or days to get any response from from any law enforcement to hold those people accountable. And yet,
Right.
when it comes to to trying to being aggressive towards Native people just defending their lands, and again, I got to go back. This, I'm not a big fan of any of the court systems on U.S. or the Canadian side, the U.S. courts or the Canadian courts. But the Canadian Supreme Court, they flat out said, look, that land is Wet'suwet'en territory. I mean, they didn't make any. They talked about original title, and
Yep.
who. So, and this is every ruling has gone in favor of Native people. And I'm not saying that they can't manipulate the courts and get a ruling against our people. That's why I don't give stock in their rulings. But because they're not granting this stuff, they're just acknowledging what we've always said and what our people have always said. And so when you take somebody like Andrew Scheer, who just thinks that they have absolute eminent domain powers over all of what they call Canada, without, as you said earlier, without any legal title to any of the land. I mean, they really don't have any. I mean, they have less of a title to the land than even the U.S. does. The U.S. made crap up, and they used the doctrine of Christian discovery, to create this land title basis. But Canada didn't even do that. They don't even have a court case, bad or otherwise, that supports their claim to the title.
Right. And the thing is, we look at Wet'suwet'en because that's where everything went down, what happened twice. But there's other people out there who are defending and blocking that line. You look at in Blue River where the Manuel sisters are living in tiny houses, living there and protecting that and trying to keep the man camps, which affect all the women because
missing and murdered Indigenous women are vulnerable because
that's right.
of those. And what you're saying is on either side of that imaginary line. Same on the U.S. side. I mean, we have territory after territory after territory that these this so-called development is imposing. It is trespassing. And so you're right. I mean, about the Wet'suwet'en story, what makes that story so impressive is the fact that these guys started 10 years ago, not only making clear what their stance was, but really saying no, we're living here, and they started reestablishing communities, camps, and community buildings to put their people right there, living off the land, experiencing and living more of a sustainable life. They've actually said, no, we're not going to be huddled into these villages that Canada has forced us into. We're going to enjoy the free use and enjoyment of all of our lands, and so they've been doing that for over 10 years.
Yeah. And the thing is, out there too, they talk like to talk about, we have consent from a lot of Native people and from the Canadian band council governments. Well, take the elections of the band councilors. How many people vote in those elections? Back here at home, it's a small percentage who vote in band council elections.
Yeah, and I addressed that in my last show. When I talked about free, prior and informed consent, I said the problem is consent from who? Because if you're getting consent from band counselors, that's like Canada giving permission to Canada. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's like in Dagaruntage's interview, that's gone viral. These people have got to face facts, and we'll talk in the second half more about the press conference that took place with the band counselors. But these guys do not have the legal right to grant consent, to place orders on their people. They have no power to do that because their power comes from Canada. It doesn't come from the people. And they have stepped out of our canoe and have into their ship. Even guys who have again nice flowery words. They can speak in Mohawk and they do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, if their entire existence is based out of the Indian Act, then they're no longer, Ongwe Ongwe. They're Canadians.
Right, right. That's what they are. Just like the American tribal councils are Americans.
Yep.
Those guys follow the same situation as the Canadian Band Council. And again, in that same area is monetary money that's sent. That money again belongs to our people for all the things that they've taken away from all the people, and all the lands they've taken away out west, and imposed their laws on it. They look at becoming a federally recognized tribe, and only that is to be recognized by the United States as under them.
Well, and this isn't just band councils, though. I mean, we got to be fair and be honest here. Some of these guys who claim to be traditional councils are every bit in the pocket of the United States, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or Department, or Indian Affairs on the Canadian side. I mean. So I mean, look, I listened to the one hereditary chief in his press conference out there in Westoughton territory, and he's talked about how much faith he had in his court system, meaning Canada. He said,
Right.
It's great to be, that we're treated like real British Columbians, and equality as being treated equal as British Columbians and as Canadians. So if you got even the traditional guys saying that stuff. So, I mean, and that goes for Haudenosaunee too. I mean, we've got plenty of people who want to claim to be, these traditional chiefs, but many of them have aligned themselves with, with American politics, with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I mean, look at Onondaga trying to help, or help, and I put that in parentheses, getting involved in Oneida federal recognition, in Cayuga federal recognition. I mean, their lawyer and their so-called chiefs are down there at the, lobbying the Bureau of Indian Affairs for one side or the other to be, of a leadership conflict, never trying to bring the people together. So, I mean, it's frustrating because, I mean, as much as I have a problem with, with American style democracy, being imposed on our territory. Man, we've got problems with some of these guys who want to claim to be condoled chiefs or hereditary chiefs or whatever else, because they're not doing right by the people either.
Right, and the thing with that is, our history where we put up things, we never called our people chiefs. These were spokespeople for our clan, and that's the way it's supposed to have been. Although we were supposedly, according to most of the Ungwahumwe people from out west, they're saying that we just gave in, we let them through, and they went through out there. But all of us at that time didn't get rid of who we were and get rid of our ideas on how we were. We never said this is the chief, this is the chief. But we start saying that because these white government and white government representatives were tapping our guys on the shoulder and say, "Oh, chief, you're doing a good job,"
Yeah, or paying them off, and
Right.
and the reality is, we hear people say all the time, "Oh, we have a chief system."
Right.
We never had a chief system. We had a clan system.
Right.
And again, I always try to make this point. This whole idea of people being servants of the people, that was a uniquely Haudenosaunee, Rudenosaunee, Ongwe concept. The idea that you ask people to serve your people, to be servants of the people, not leaders, not rulers, not dictators, not chiefs, but can you allow us to place you on a path, and can you make sure that you stay on the path as you're carrying our voice, that you don't deviate from that path and start having your own agenda. That's what that all means. When we say Nurionesu or Noriano, we're not talking about elevating somebody above us. So this idea, I mean, in American and Canadian politics, they say, "Oh yeah, we're in public service." No, you're not. You guys you're trying to assert yourselves as as lottery winners of an election where you guys get rich. I mean, this
Right.
it's not public service if you're looking down at the people. If you're a servant of the people, your job is to serve them, not to dictate to them. So
Yeah, and their society always tells them that, if I get in that position, I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to make money for myself. I'm going to get land for myself and my family.
yeah.
So that they forget everything that they were taught or supposed to have been taught. And a lot of them weren't taught because of the education. It's just like out west. when they say our chiefs, our hereditary chiefs. Well, I have a problem with that because we didn't have hereditary chiefs. We had
And we
people,
also didn't have matriarchs. I mean, that's the other one that
right?
keeps being said out. That
Yeah,
we have You know who a matriarch is? Queen Elizabeth. That's a
right,
matriarch. You know,
right.
that's matriarchy. I mean, and so we had neither matriarchy nor patriarchy. We had people who were the equals of each other. And when you were placed in the service of your people, your voice actually became moot because
Yeah,
now you had a responsibility not to represent yourself, but to represent the people.
right. And I think the big one of the big problems is the education that was done to our people
Yeah,
to
yeah.
accept to be Canadians. To
Well, I
accept,
mean,
accept.
even though all the Christian stuff is about hierarchy, so everything that was imposed on our people, whether it was through residential schools or whether it was through, whatever colonial rule was imposed upon them, always talked about, it created class systems. It created poor people and wealthy people, and
Right.
usually wealth at the expense of the poor. So
Yeah,
I'm at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a break. We're going to go off on a song here. We're going to and we'll come back. I want to talk about the press conference. I want to talk about what some of these guys who were being touted as Mohawk leaders had to say. So I want to talk about that when we come back. So give
do
me
we
a
have to?
yes. We have to do it. We got to do it. We got to call them out. All right.
Okay.
All right. This is John Kane, Gargillo, with my my friend Sakoietah. We'll be right back after this. All right. Thanks for coming back. Hey, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John of the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, the folks at Grand River Enterprises, and our new sponsor, the folks at Cat Res Smoke and Gas Shops. I want to thank these guys for jumping on. And again, all of you who sponsor the work that we do here, what you're doing is you're helping get these conversations out there. And look, we're not a big viral sensation, but there are people who hear the program and then say, yeah, I think that, and that's the way I think, but I've never heard anybody say it before. And it's the way that the conversation continues, and it's really important that these words, whether you agree with everything that I say or my friend Sakoietah says or Dagaruntige or anybody else. The point is to have the conversation and think about it. And again, use that idea of critical thinking and put yourself in a spot to think about who we are as a people and not only what took place in the past, but where our future is. And that's where you're going to find yourself in thinking completely differently about how much you need to participate in the Canadian election system or the U.S. election system. I go through this all the time, especially coming into another election cycle in the U.S. How many people are saying, "Oh yeah, we need to go out and vote"? No, we don't. We don't need to participate in their system. And I always put the challenge out there. I says, on the U.S. side, you show me one place where the native vote could turn a red state blue, or a blue state red for that matter. It doesn't exist. And not only does it not exist, it wouldn't exist if every native person registered to vote as a U.S. citizen and voted for the same candidate, which would never happen. I mean, I know the ones who really push, trying to push the native vote are mostly the Democrats, right? They think, oh yeah, native people got to support, the progressive agenda. They got to support Democrats, and yet we got guys like Mario or Andrew Cuomo or Heidi Heitkamp. These people who work directly against native people, or on the Canadian side, the same thing. You've got people. Oh, you got to vote for Justin Trudeau because Scheer is so bad. You know what? Scheer is bad. He's an asshole. There's no question about that. But the fact of the matter is, putting a wolf in sheep's clothing like Justin Trudeau still doesn't serve our needs. So why should we participate in those elections? I mean, this is an ongoing conversation that I have. But what I'm saying, if you look at most native territories and you look at how many churches there are in our territories, how much military enlistment there is in our territories, how many Canadian flags or U.S. flags you'll see flying in our territories, I'm afraid that if you really took the temperature, the political temperature of Native people, you might find they lean a little farther right than they do left. So all you people who think that Native people need to go out and vote, it's not going to matter either way. But we don't vote as a bloc. We don't share the same political views of the right or the left. We aren't right or left. We are distinct people. And the problem is the folks who get into these so-called leadership roles, these band council chiefs, these tribal councils, most of these people are so locked into Americanism or Canadian idealism that they've almost completely abandoned their identity. They're riding the money that comes as a band counselor, but not as a Native person, not as Ongwe, as an Indian Act Indian, defined by them, or a Bureau of Indian Affairs Indian as defined by them. So anyway, let me reintroduce my friend Sakoietah to the program. Thanks for hanging in with us and helping me go through this stuff. Now, I know that you you heard some of the press conference that some of these guys, these band council chiefs, put on, and part of it is pretty disturbing. I know I got to give a little bit of credit. I read Mike Myers' review of some of what took place there, and I agree in large part to a lot of what he said. I mean, one of the problems is they are not the Haudenosaunee. In fact, right. They aren't the Gunyagahaga. They are band counselors, and they are essentially almost like municipal governments of they are municipal governments of Canada. It's funny. I was just reviewing a document that was done for the Seneca Nation, and this non-native guy, Harvard School of Government, and all of that other stuff. He wrote that native government, tribal governments, were part of U.S. federalism, and suggested that tribal governments fit right in there between states and counties in terms of the breakdown of governmental structures within the United States. And of course, if that's true, then we better be walking away from that. And while you may have band counselors or tribal counselors who operate that way, if you ask the people, if you go to the vast majority of Native people, they don't consider themselves part of U.S. or Canadian federalism or the governing structures of Canada or the United States. And this identity problem is really cuts to the core of what most of us are challenged by. And like I said, I asked the question: free, prior, and informed consent from who? Because if it's from band counselors, that's like Canada giving Canada permission.
Geez, I'm tired from all my talking here.
Well, now I want you to weigh in. What did you hear in this press conference?
Well, I tried not to listen to it at first. As soon as I seen Mike Mitchell giving in the opening statement, a man that said he had 30 years of involvement in political field, he tried to kill our people.
Yeah,
he's the one that went with Canada to destroy us. And here he is talking this talk, and then you got people on there too that also don't really know what they're talking about. You have the AFN leader saying, my Haudenosaunee people here.
Yeah.
Those are not Haudenosaunee people. Those are Canadian people. And they all talk about Canada. I wrote a little thing on a site that brought in Simon from Ganasadaga, where he said, we got to have compassion. Compassion? What compassion has the Canadian government given to our Native people? How many years have our people not been able to drink their water? How many years have our people never been able to build a big economy because Canada didn't want to be threatened?
Or have our children stolen from us, or, right, and all kinds of other things. Well, the other thing that Simon did, he was one of the guys who was calling for the blockades to end and making it sound like we needed to give something to Canada before we could get it. No, the reason for these blockades is because Canada is doing wrong. We stop the blockades when Canada stops doing what they're doing. And so these guys, it's the same thing that Trudeau sending Mark Miller in. You think just because you send somebody there with a handshake, that means that we owe you, we've got to do something for you now? You haven't done anything yet.
Yeah. Well, Trudeau was scared to come himself.
Sure.
So he sent Mark Miller. which I give a little bit of credit to Mark Miller because he put himself in the same situation as during the Oka crisis, where one of their ministers wanted to develop this peaceful situation, and next thing you knew, he got fired.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a joke to Mark if we see you again.
Yeah.
You know. After.
Well, let me get back to Mike Mitchell though a little bit. One of the problems I had is if Mike Mitchell is gonna take to a press conference and then start talking about the virtues of the great law of the Guyana de Goa, he's not a chief, or a title holder under the Guyana de Goa. He's a band council chief, and for him to stand up and make it sound like the Guyana de Goa is only about maintaining peace for the sake of anything else, at the cost of anything else, and what he missed in all this stuff is, look, Guyana de Goa is about maintaining peace, not being pacifist, not or I mean, and of course, even if you're a pacifist, you can't be a pacifist if you have no ability to choose something other than peace. If you can only lay down, then you're not a pacifist. You're just weak. And so when Mike Mitchell stands up and says, "Well, the whole basis of the great law is about being peaceful," no, it isn't. It's about doing the things you can do to right the wrongs and restore peace. Now, you can't restore peace if you're being attacked. If you can't push back, and so if the Wet'suwet'en people are being attacked, we can't just what we're going to stand there with a bunch of peace signs and say please stop doing that, or we're going to pray, or we're going to burn tobacco. No, you have to do something that that there has to be a bit of a pushback. So when Mike Mitchell stands up there and starts talking as if somehow he's the authority on the Guyana de Goa, I mean, that's offensive. I mean, that's offensive.
Right, and then for him to come out and say his so-called native name, well, he lost that when he went the other way. His name is Mike Mitchell. It's nothing more than that. And then him to describe what the Great Law was all about. He called himself a faith keeper. He holds no title within.
Of course not. Of course not.
Not in the Ganyangahaga, people who follow Guyana de Goa, or not even with Garawio who follow it. They're supposed to abandon what he's done.
Yeah.
So him to announce all that stuff is just, again, lies. Lies to our people.
Well, and then one of the other guys, this Don Brandt, was suggesting something along the lines that the idea of standing up and resisting is a Canadian thing. I mean, are you freaking kidding me? So he tried to make it sound like that these guys in Tyndonega were fulfilling their Canadian obligation, their obligation to Canada. I mean,
and I hate to say his name was not Brandt. It was a Miracle.
Oh, was it Miracle?
I hate to put that on the Miracles who are in Tyndonega.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? I mean, most of these names are fabrications anyway. So
right,
yeah, but
no, the guy is totally. I mean, you look at him; he looks like a white Canadian.
He's clueless. Yeah,
he talks like a white Canadian. Everything he comes out, and he tries to portray himself with the few words that he knows in Ganyangaha.
Yeah, somebody taught him to say. Yeah,
right, and even then he messes those words up.
Oh man, it was no. I mean, so you get a press conference of band counselors, and even Joe Norton, and again, I know Mike Myers made the comment. For Joe Norton to stand up there and attack the Indian Act when that's been the foundation of everything he's been his whole life in terms of a band counselor in Ganawage. I mean, Indian Act is what he's all about.
Yeah. But the thing is, they're attacking the Indian Act and they want to become a municipality.
Which is even worse. I mean, essentially, I mean, right. It gets back to that whole thing. Like I said, this white guy writing this thing for the Seneca Nation, making it sound like we need to structure ourselves within the federalism of Canada or the United States instead of, again, for all of the lip service paid by, Jagmeet Singh and the Miller or Justin Trudeau or any of these guys who some of these people had some positive things to say, but they still can't accept the fact that we aren't Canadians or
Right.
that we aren't Americans, that we are a distinct people. Not saying we're better, but that we're just not them. We just aren't
Yeah.
them.
And it takes a lot of education to our people to explain to them that they are not Canadian, that they should not hold Canadian passports or whatever it is. They should not do that because that makes them a Canadian.
Well, and
Yeah.
and, and again, listen to even some of these ministers in the House of Commons quote some lines from the Indigenous, Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and I've got problems with some of the language. I mean, most of what's not in it, but even some of the stuff that's in it is wrong. But it talks about this idea of forced assimilation. That's what the passport issue is. The passport is about saying we will not let you travel. In fact, we're not even going to let you. We're going to do everything we can to stop you from traveling across the U.S.-Canadian border. Another fabricated line.
Right.
We're not even going
Right.
to let you unless you accept U.S. or Canadian citizenship and carry the documents that prove that you're a U.S. or Canadian citizen. And you try to explain that to our own people that at some point. Look what took place over the last couple of weeks, with these blockades. We moved Canada, and I say we. I'm giving credit to the people who are doing it. I'm not trying to take credit, but our people moved Canada in a way that they haven't been moved in a long time. And
Right.
and look, we can get all the conservatives all pissed off and calling for military action and all that other stuff, and we can get the liberals all saying, oh no, we got to play nice, we've got to kill them with kindness, or whatever else they're suggesting. But at the end of the day, they had to hold this session in the House of Commons because of our actions, because
Yeah.
our actions are trying to condemn their actions. I want to be clear. This isn't an aggressive act from us. This is a defensive act. We are trying to hold Canada accountable.
Right. And you got to give credit to all the young people,
Yep.
especially the young people. They're taking the action. They're out there pushing this issue. And then you got to give a little bit of credit to some of the settlers out there because
Yeah,
they're
those
getting
allies are
involved.
out there. No, we do have some people who stood with our people, and look, you hear a lot of positive things being said, and look, there are plenty of rednecks on the Canadian side. I saw a video of these guys trying to break down a barricade, and they finally got arrested, which was kind of comical. But no, we've got a lot of non-native people who are supporting us, and they because they know that we're right. And the other thing I got to, and I'm not trying to place the women above the men, but I think when people hear about blockades, they should know that it's our women out there every bit as much as it is our men, our young men and women. Older men and women. I mean, this is not something that is just a bunch of gangland members, or as Andrew Scheer tried to suggest, like it was just this rogue faction of upstarts or something like that. No,
Right.
it's. I mean, and some of our people are even bringing their children out there.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, the women take a big responsibility in what they're doing. I've seen young women from here in Akwesasne that are taking the stance on this thing. And a lot of the women are taking the stance on the murdered and missing women and men. They're taking the forefront, and it's about time for us to do something.
right.
I have had a lot of discussions with warriors who live in BC and Saskatchewan, Manitoba, who are now really starting to take part in it.
Yeah.
And I keep talking to them, telling them, well, warrior is not just to go to war. There are a lot of things that have to happen for a war society. One of the basic things I tell them is that we have to be unified. We have to be ready for anything as warriors. And part of that is taking care of the murdered and missing women situation.
Well, and the
That
other thing that
we,
I think that's important to remember is there's also the issue of the future.
Yep.
and not just about looking after children, but what are we putting in place? So when I see the tiny home projects, when I see this Unistoten camp and the Wistoten people, beginning to build homes in areas that they had pretty much left because they had, again, Canada pushes us, pushes our people into these residential areas that they throw our own money back at us for and that kind of stuff. But when I start seeing our people living more sustainably, that's the future. And so not only do we have to deal with the with issues, the traumas of the past and of the present, but we also have to have the vision going forward. The reason that we fight these pipelines is because those are a threat to our future. And the reason we are trying to promote sustainable living, not just for ourselves, but trying to encourage other people to do that, is because the future does not bode well. Man is a very, very destructive force. And
Right.
and unless our voices, begin to be heard, and unless we start leading by example on how to live, then then we're not really carrying the burden that that warriors or our men or women should do. We've got to take it all on.
Yeah. It's really a great big task that our people today are taking on, to preserve it for the children yet born, to make sure they have the land. We have to look at an economy that's going to help our people. We can't continue on living on what the government says they're giving us, which actually belongs to us. We got to have something going for our people.
Well, and it kind of goes back to this problem with band counselors, and when people question, well, who authorized these people to do these blockades? Well, nobody did. These are being done because the failure for us to address these invasions of our territories with pipelines and mineral extraction, or tribal councilors being paid off. I mean, because there's plenty of that going on.
Yeah.
Look, not even a so-called hereditary chief or traditional chief has the authority to mortgage the future of our children. I mean,
right.
We know that some of what has taken place in the past, lands that were ceded illegally, we know that the very guys who put their X on a piece of paper, so whether it was Canandaigua Treaty or any of these documents, many of those things were illegal, because within the Guyana-Goa, we know that no man or woman has been given that a power to bankrupt or to mortgage our children's future. So when these band counselors who who has Canada run their elections for them want to stand up and say, oh, we have the authority to sign permission for a pipeline. No, you don't. And so, no, I see a half dozen or a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen young people taken to the tracks. They have authority, not these guys sitting in band council.
Yep, that's right. It's absolutely right. It's the people that have the authority, and they have to understand that. They don't look for a guy who's going to be the chief and lead you through all the whole processes. You have to take part in that. It's like saying, well, we have to pray and create the creator, which they love to say, the creator is going to help us.
Yeah, how many times did I hear, these guys invoke the name of the creator or Sakoietah in this press conference? It just makes me sick when I hear this stuff. No, it's just frustrating. It's just frustrating. I don't know. But here is the one challenge though, and I'm not sure, and it's not for me to say or even for you to say, but for these guys who are blocking the highways and the railways and even the seaway, if it ever comes to that, whatever, we have to have a strategy, or the people who are doing it have to have a strategy. They don't need to tell me or you what that strategy is, but what point do we say, or do we acknowledge that Canada has moved in a far enough direction that we can say, all right, now we'll give you something back? I think that's one thing, but the other question has to be, do we, and you and I talked about this on the phone a little bit. My concern is, I don't want to create a conflict that puts our people in harm's way. I'm not saying that we don't take, we know there's always a risk in the things that we do, but I don't want to intentionally be arrested or brutalized by the RCMP or the military or anybody else. So I think I hope our people adopt a strategy that says, well, here's how we come to the table. Here's how we not retreat, but how we remove ourselves and then come back and reassert ourselves. I mean, we don't have to block every road. We only have to block enough roads. We only have to do. We don't have to make it easy for the cops to come after us.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to think. I think we have to think about exactly how we're going to do this, you know, and how some things are going to be done. You know, we have so much territory that belongs to us, and the people of Canada who were in governing position before thought, well, hey, let's put this railroad through these Native people's land. You know, not thinking about the president now. And they're the ones. They're the ones saying, "Let's put these pipelines through Native."
Well, I go back to that MacDonald-Laurier report back over a decade ago, when that Douglas Bland wrote that report, where he used an Ivy League computer model to determine what was the likelihood of an insurgency, that could impact Canada. And one of the things that he talked about was how so much of Canada's infrastructure runs through our territories. And they may have thought, well, these are sacrifice zones that we can run this stuff through the territory. But then how did they defend it? And that's where right now we're in a position that not only for projects that they want to do through our territories, but projects that they've already done through our territories. When they run their major rail lines through our territories, and their highways, then they've created their own vulnerability, and we have to exploit that vulnerability to make sure that they don't further invade our territories with these projects.
Yeah, and let's get back to those band councils. the band councils are the worst thing that could happen to our people. They're the ones who think they got all kinds of decision-making powers. They think they got all kinds of money, and they just guide the people in the wrong direction. And then you got people who stand up for them so much to say, oh, they're doing such a great job. Back here, they did Dundee land claims, and they said they were getting $240 million. And people just said, wow, we're going to get that much money.
Then I said on my show, that's how much the Senecas paid New York State in 1 year. And everybody says, wait, what? What do you mean?
Yeah,
I kind of blew that number right out of the water. I know some of the folks at Akwesasne who heard my show, and when they heard that, they're like, well, what the hell are we selling this out for? But
right.
No,
and the thing was, they didn't get $240 million.
Of course not, because they're immediately gonna take money off of it so they can say, we're gonna give you some of your land back and take it out of that $240 million.
Plus, they gave them money to do research and whatever, and they had to get paid back from that.
Sure. All right. Hey, we're just about out of time. One final note. Look, we have to acknowledge that our power is with our people. So even in the absence of people who have a firm grasp of the Guyana-Lagoa, the Guyana-Lagoa is about process. It's about how the people resolve the conflicts. The first thing we have to do is we have to educate our people to say, look, we're not them. We're just not them, and I think that's where this all starts. So, Sakoietah, I want to thank you for joining me. It's always great to have you, come on the show. We got to get you in town so you can sit in the studio with us.
Yeah, I'd like to make a trip up there someday.
All right. Well, I left breadcrumbs.
Yeah, but there's more breadcrumbs going towards Ganawaga because I want to go see the Garundagan.
Well, drag them out this way. You're both welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks for joining me. We'll talk soon. All right, folks. That's just about it. We got to wrap it up. Thanks for listening. We'll be back here. Let's see what. I'm not in New York this week, but I am going to do my 2-hour Let's Talk show live on Facebook. So I'm still going to do that on Thursday from 3 to 5. So you can find us on Facebook Live. We just won't be on WBAI 99.5 in New York City, but we're still going to do the show. So look for us on Thursday, and of course we'll be back here on Saturday. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Nyaweh.